Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So, the budget 2021 is out. Key points at a glance from the BBC. We'll use this as a launch-off point, but the main things is that it is quite a mixed bag. That is to say that the positives are that the tax-free allowance, for example, hasn't changed. The next threshold up at about 50 grand is pretty much the same, save for about £125 or so. The tax rates themselves, 20%, 40%, are staying, so that's nice. The drop down to the VAT to 5% is remaining, so that's definitely good news. But the negative side is corporation tax, and corporations are just people, is increasing to 25% from 19% next April, and that there is a lot of so-called investment, whether that be into what they call regeneration, or in their infrastructure, or in the businesses that they decide to invest in. Now, obviously, it is nice if they decide, okay, so we screwed you out of business, and therefore we're going to try and make it up to you. That's nice. However, not only is it not the government's goal to put you out of business in the first place, it is not the government's goal to get you back in business afterwards. And I know that might sound harsh, it really might. However, I will always go back to the quote that the scariest words in the English language are, "We're from the government and we're here to help." And that is the point. That quite often with these things, there are too many hoops to jump through in order so that it isn't taken advantage of by other people, so it's not really worth attempting in the first place. Or, if it's easy enough, then it's going to be taken advantage of and it isn't going to go where it's supposed to go. So what is the easy solution? Just hold back. Just don't bloody do anything. The same with their infrastructure investments. It doesn't really need to happen, provided that you cut the legislation that causes the restrictions. Then it's going to happen, because there is definitely money to be made if there is a need of which your services are fulfilling. It's as simple as that. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. So, with their coronavirus support, the furlough scheme is continuing. However, employers to be asked to contribute 10% in July and 20% in August and September for the 80% of employees' wages. And obviously it's the lower paid most affected, because if you're earning more, chances are it's a high skilled job which you can do from home. So again, biggest wealth transfer in history. Support for the self-employed also be extended until September, provided they can show their income from 2019 to 2020, which grants that weren't available before, as in their support, up to £7,500, I believe it was. Okay. You've got 600,000 more self-employed people will be eligible for help, as I say. The £20 weekly uplift in universal credit is staying for another 6 months, worth £500. Just akin to that, working tax credit claimants will get £500 one-off payment, so just throw money at it. Minimum wage isn't changing, it's the living wage to increase to £8.91 an hour from April. And whenever they're raising the bottom bar of the minimum wage, or just the minimum wage for over 23s, as in the living wage, then that is not a reflection of being nice, not at all. Instead, it's just a reflection of inflation, because of course, if now the minimum required to hire somebody has raised, if you're still getting the same amount of people employed, that money's got to come from somewhere, in which case that's going to be inflation. And it's going to hit the last people to spend their money the most, which is why they say inflation is just a tax on savings. Most likely the middle class, because it's savings instead of investments, if it were to be the upper class, for example. That is, if enough people are employed. Obviously, we're against the minimum wage over here on this channel, given that it stops people from getting the important experience in order to be earning more anyway. And you shouldn't have to have a minimum wage set at whatever level if the education system is actually any bloody good. What is the result? Well, of course, it means less employment, because employers are not willing to take a risk on people, in which case they can't get the experience, and also then moving over to machines, autonomous machines, in order to get that done for the business at a more reliable, predictable rate. If you can't trust the government interfering with their contracts, then they're going to have to do it another way, whether that be self-order at places like McDonald's, or whether that be self-checkout at places like Tesco. Either or. State of the economy, well, it shrank by 10%. What a surprise. There was a forecast, but let's not really care about that. 700,000 people have lost their jobs since the pandemic began. So, once things can open up again, there will of course be a load of new businesses springing up as well, trying to capitalise on the new opportunities that have been created. As we have seen, let's not forget, new businesses actually be created throughout the pandemic, with people having to change and adapt. It's not easy, but there is always an opportunity. Unemployment expected to peak at 6.5%, okay. UK to borrow a peacetime record of £355 billion this year. And it's always the borrowing from where. It's okay. It's not going to be taxpayers then. Cool. It's borrowing from other people, right? And how are they going to pay this money back? From the taxpayers. Oh, I see. So either way, whether it'll be inflation or borrowing from overseas, it's still the taxpayer that's paying it. I see. It's still not government giving money. The borrowing to total $234 billion from 2021 to 22. Taxation, as I say, no changes to rates of income tax. Bloody good. The thing that I find hilarious about all of this is they go, we want to stimulate growth and we want the economy to do better. How are we going to do that? How about we drop tax rates? Oh yeah, that'll definitely work. Cool. So now we're all doing so much better. Yeah. So why are you wanting to lift them again? Ah, yes. Good question. It's not for the betterment of the country. Not even for a second. It never was intended to be that way. Instead, it is to say, well, you have to pay us because that's just the cost of living in a civilized society, of course. And don't forget that we can spend this money so much better than you, and you need us, and we do it so much better than you do. It's all lies, but it is just to aggrandize themselves so that we are supposed to think that the government intervention is necessary, when obviously the more they leave us alone, we realise that it isn't, so they can't stay hands off for too long, otherwise we'll realise they're not needed. So the corporation tax change, April 2023, not next year, sorry, to 25%. The stamp duty holiday on house purchases extended to 30th of June for up to 500,000, and then to September for 250,000, and from October it'll be back to 125,000, as it was before the lockdown. Not the pandemic, the lockdown. Inheritance tax thresholds, pensions, lifetime allowances, and annual capital gains tax exemptions to be frozen for the next 5 years as well, which isn't good. Inheritance tax shouldn't be a thing in the first place. You've already been taxed. Let's not get taxed again. Health and education. This one gets to me a bit. With £1.65 billion to support the UK's vaccination rollout. Bear in mind this is separate from the NHS funding. And £50 million to boost the UK's vaccine testing capability. And after that, £1,650 million, you got £10 million to support armed forces veterans with mental health needs. As in, vets with PTSD. That is essentially what they're talking about. I don't agree with all the wars that are being waged. Certainly not. But I do have a lot of respect for our brothers in arms and soldiers fighting rightly or wrongly, but with the intent of protecting the people behind them. As Churchill said, that a good soldier does not fight because of what is in front of him, but because of what is behind him. So seeing that discrepancy there was very disconcerting. Much rather say, how about I have more disposable income so I can funnel more of it to the charities of which I support. Perfect. Instead of having to support a government that I don't. £19 million for domestic violence programmes. Okay, cool. It's gender neutral, of course, as it's funding network of respite rooms for homeless women. Yes. Yes. Sex doesn't matter unless it favours women, then yeah, definitely. £40 million of new funding for victims of 1960s thalidomide scandal and lifetime support guarantee. That's interesting timing, isn't it? You remember thalidomide in the 1960s, the morning sickness tablets, which the government was saying was definitely safe to have and wouldn't have any knock-on effects, and then children were being born with missing limbs, and then it got tracked back and said, oh, I see, it looks like your health and safety government testing isn't very good. Why are you mentioning that now? Bit of an awkward timing when it's just under vaccination rollout. Yeah, I still don't trust you. So, but that was 50 years ago, nearly 60 years ago now. So, yeah, but that was 50, 60 years after previous things that they said they'd moved on so much better since then, and yet they still made the mistakes. So how about I hold off? My body, my choice and all that. Arts and sport. £400 million to help arts venues in England, including museums and galleries, to reopen. And they need that investment because of the lack of education. £300 million recovery package for professional sport and £25 million for grassroots football, including £1.2 million to help stage delayed women's Euros football tournament in England in 2022. I think a lot of us will be saying, I think that the football clubs tend to get enough financial support anyway. I think they're going to be just fine. Businesses, so firms will be able to deduct investment costs from tax bills, reducing taxable profits by 130%. Yeah, crazy manipulation that they're going on there, but I think that just says enough about how the tax code is. So, I hope the accountants are ready for this influx. Incentives for firms to take on apprentices to rise to £3,000 and £126 million for traineeships. Far more important than university usage. Most definitely. Definitely. On-the-job training, it's not as if you get this degree and there'll definitely be a job for you at the end. In what? I don't know, but there will be. Which is utter bullshit and a lot more expensive and unnecessary, and it's just parting, isn't it? As Dr. Jordan B. Peterson says, the extension of your childhood for the cost of your adulthood. Whereas going down with your eye on the goal to go with, I'm an apprentice and I know what I'm working towards at the end. Good on you. The lower VAT rate for hospitality firms to be maintained at 5% until September, as I say, and then an interim 12.5% rate. No need for it to go up. Fucking leave it alone. £5 billion in restart grants for shops and other businesses in England forced to close. And again, I do sympathise. I honestly do. However, there are going to be seismic shifts happening after COVID anyway. Your business plan, which was successful before COVID, is not going to be effective after the government has intervened like this. People's behaviours have changed. You will need to be able to adapt. You will need to change your business plan entirely. Your business itself may no longer be worthwhile. Sorry to say. But if you've got the business acumen to build up a successful business before, you can most likely do it again, instead of this restart. £6,000 per premise for non-essential outlets due to reopen in April, and £18,000 for gyms, personal care providers and other hospitality and leisure businesses. Very peculiar, this one, especially given that you've got some outlets which have essentially perishable goods and won't last that long, and then others which will stay in storage and then be as good as new once they're willed out a year later. For example, gyms compared to personal care providers, well, if they've got medicine, for example, it's not going to work so well. Same as hospitality and leisure businesses, if they've got food on site or drinks, that's not going to last so long. Whereas gyms, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. After all, you can start a gym out of a self-storage slot anyway. Just wheel it out into the car park, or just keep it in the little garage, and jobs are good 'un. New visa scheme to help startups and rapidly growing tech firms source talent from overseas. Yeah, that's going to go down so well after Brexit. Contactless payment limit will rise to £100 later this year, so everyone's going to get their little iZettle, their little contactless payment machines. Take them on the tube. Okay, maybe not because of internet connection. Oh no, they've got Wi-Fi there, that'll be fine. And just tap them onto people's pockets, and now you can get £100 each time. Perfect. And it's all crowded and people are bustling between each other. You won't know it's happened. So, please do invest in a protection for your credit debit cards, as they're contactless, so that it can't be happening to you. Please do. Alcohol, tobacco and fuel. No extra tax on spirits, wine, cider or beer. Alcohol duties frozen. Tobacco duties to rise by inflation plus 2%. And fuel duty frozen as well. Good, so tobacco duties, that'll be especially true for cigars, which they definitely encourage people to start smoking, no doubt. Environment, transport, infrastructure and housing. They've got a new infrastructure bank in Leeds with £12 billion in capital, with aim of funding £40 billion worth of public and private projects. Let's focus on the private, yeah? Cool. £15 billion in green bonds, including for retail investors to help finance the transition to net zero by 2050. And believe it or not, you don't really need to be doing this. I mean, if you can get someone like Elon Musk to make electric cars look cool, you don't need these other incentives. You really don't. It's as simple as that. 1.2 billion for Scotland, 740 million for Welsh, and 410 for Ireland as well. £1 billion to promote regeneration in 45 English towns, 150 million for community groups to take over pubs at risk of closure, and free ports, which is the other bit of good news, of course. Then East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, Solent, Thames, and Teesside. Wonderful. The free ports will actually have some benefit there then. And I know you might be thinking, well, they're just coming in and out, they're not really doing anything here. Sure, except that they're not coming in and out by magic, obviously. They got people coming in from nearby in order to work on it, and the infrastructure itself there has to be built somehow, somewhere, by people. Again, probably domestically and nearby. So that's all good news for the running of it as well. So, yeah, sounds good. Bear in mind, we don't actually need tax to get revenue. Shocking. But that's it for me. So let me know what you guys think of it overall. I mean, obviously we could never get our hopes up that high to think that the Conservatives would do something worthwhile, but at least it's not Labour, I suppose, for what it's worth. And we know that the Conservatives have failed us on a socially conservative level, so we're hoping they were going to be more fiscally responsible than they have been, as that was kind of the last bastion that they might have in order to retain their crown of being the so-called Conservatives. But I'm not really seeing what they're conserving here. But let me know. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say, and as always, until next time, have a good one.